the groundwork that Jason laid out in his, Jason generally directs the first couple episodes of each season. And what he does beautifully is really get to the essence of the scenes. So there's not a lot of coverage, especially because, in episodic, we just don't have a lot of time. So really taking the time to have really considered compositions and blocking and camera moves that help enhance what's happening with the script, with the actor's performance.
Money, that which separates the haves from the have-nots. Patience, frugality, sacrifice.
I've only done short sequences with him as a director. I did a sequence with him in season 2. I did a sequence in Mexico with him on season 3. But Ben has shot his episodes. I've mostly worked with him as a producer and as an actor. And he has an uncanny ability of just switching over. When he's directing, he's very much in charge. He knows exactly what he wants. When he's producing, it's bouncing ideas off of each other with the incoming director. A director and I coming up with a way of doing a sequence, and the director having a question of, hey, I was thinking about doing this like this. Do you feel like that's in line with the tone of the show? Do you think that would work? And it's kind of just, discussing that in tone meetings and concept meetings. And then as an actor, he's very gracious with the directors. He comes in prepared. He does the scene as an actor. And unless there's something not working in the scene, like maybe there's a plot point that he thinks is important that is not maybe apparent to that director because they haven't read future scripts or don't know the full outline of the season yet, but otherwise he's very much just an actor at that moment, and so it's really impressive to watch him switch over.
Another man is dead.
People make choices, Wendy. We don't have to live under the weight of those decisions.
At least admit it was good for us.
We have an outline for the whole season, and we have multiple scripts. But when a director, like for instance, I started this season, I shot episodes 3 and 4 were my first episodes. So that director doesn't know what happens in episodes 8, 9, and 10, right? Like, there's not that many scripts finished, and they may have a meeting with a showrunner that gives them, conceptually, tonally, and story-wise, this is where we're going.
Wendy?
Sometimes, if you don't move forward, you die.
The showrunner and Jason really understand the whole season, especially Chris, the showrunner. You're meant to understand that episode as a complete piece that fits into a bigger piece. So if you find out some major plot point that's a surprise to the audience, by not knowing that necessarily intrinsically as you're shooting that, you're shooting it as truth in that moment, so that later when it's a surprise, it still works.
You lie to your wife, you lie to me, and you lie to yourself.
The violence is extreme, but it's also matter of fact. It's not being glorified with the camera. It's not being really even enhanced, right? It's like, this is the world these characters inhabit. It's the Navarro decision at the end is the equivalent of hiring and firing, right? And that's all it is. And so it happens very fast. And the impact is more in Laura and Jason's reaction than it is in any of the physical gore, because the gore is like 4 frames.
Money is, at its essence, that measure of a man's choices.
What'd you do today for our family?
The overall look of the show is cool, but there's definitely a lot of relief to that look, and specifically in season 3, if you're in the casino, for instance, the casino floor is very warm. If you're in Mexico, in Navarro's compound, right, it's very warm. All the light in his conference room is filtered through these enormous stained glass windows that naturally tint the light to be very amber. The idea of always being in the shadows and this constantly living in the shadows and having this life that is, not supposed to be visible to the average person, living a double life. So we do a lot of work to make it feel like there's this kind of oppressive cloud over the characters at all times when they are outside, unless it is appropriate for it not to be, for it to be in hard sunlight. So naturally, shadow light is much cooler.
Yeah.
And the nature of the light has desaturation built into it, and then on top of that, we just balance the cameras so that daylight plays cool. But as soon as you walk into a night interior with practicals, and it can be quite warm. I think the overall takeaway is that the show is very, very cold. But that's not uniformly across every scene or location. Found a great location in a mausoleum for Navarro's compound. Now, the mausoleum itself, is very clay-colored, putty walls, right? Giant stained glass windows, deep, dark, reflective wood surfaces. So to go in there and try to shoot something that's the color palette of the show, that's very cold, would just intrinsically fail, right? So embracing what that location is and then enhancing that further, right, is great. And one of the things that was a really nice transition for us is when Marty was kidnapped at the end of episode 3, and he arrives in Mexico on episode, we're really with him in Mexico at the beginning of 4. Because of the nature of that set, of the being with the lights out and then having these kind of torture lights that come on, we were able to start in this shadow light that is very much in line with the show.
Yeah.
And Marty is pulled up out of that dungeon, brought up the stairs through kind of security cam footage, brought through a great hall, and then now we're out of security cam footage, and he's goes from being almost a silhouette as he's pushed into the room of this giant room for Navarro's conference room, and now we're in this very warm world. So it was a nice build that the director and I built. Shireen directed that episode, and it was a very easy transition. So now as we come back to Mexico and it's very warm within that episode, you've already established that, but we ease the viewer in kind of step by step.